what's up, everybody? Welcome to Fire Time Network Power Hour. Grant, so good to be here, man. How you doing?
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Tim.
I know. It's awesome. We just had the trade show. It feels like it was 3 days ago, but it's been almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was just together in person and seeing everybody. I feel like I'm still riding really, really high from that.
Yeah. And it's just been a total whirlwind since you got back. And I've talked to so many people from the trade show, and it seems like, yeah, the last 2 weeks has went by like it's 2 days.
I know.
But it's good to be here.
Okay, I'm honestly, I'm genuinely excited. I feel this momentum just like getting back together in person, and business is still crazy, but it seems like most people have a little bit more time on their hands to focus on the things that matter. And yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Well, let's frame this out real quick. So, as we always say, when it comes to Power Hour, the reason we do this, we want to spend an intentional 60 minutes together, really diving into something that is going to help our businesses. And so often we get caught in this whirlwind of, the day-to-day, and it's easy just to wake up at the end and be like, what did I do? Did I actually move the needle? So the hope is that this gives you time to think and to dialogue about what the important things are in your business. And really, this is about the community. It's about a conversation and the idea that like we win by pouring ourselves out for others. And I think that's always really important to think about. Like, we don't win by, cutting each other's throats and like climbing the pile of bodies to the top. The way that we win is by pouring ourselves out for the sake of everybody else.
Yep.
Well, let's jump into this. And I see Noel right here. He said he's been waiting for the show. That's awesome, man. Super, super excited to have you.
No.
And Grant, so today it's everything that we missed, right? Like I feel like every single one of these Power Hours so far, we get to the end of it, it's like, oh gosh, like there's so many things that I want to hit. Have you felt the same way?
Oh yeah. And it's funny, Tim, that we're not going to have enough time to talk about all this today, right? You know that. I mean, I've already X'd out a few of the different Power Hours because there's some main ones that I want to focus on. But yeah, I'm excited, and it's cool because there's 60 minutes is never enough time for any of these topics, and we tend to get in the weeds every once in a while in trying to explain it or being challenged to sell or run the sales script or whatnot. But yeah, I'm super excited to kind of go over the 10-step execution and kind of the remaining steps. And I'm excited just because there seems like there's a lot of momentum behind the 10 steps, and so many people utilize so many of these steps, if not all of them already, and kind of putting them together makes sense for a lot of people. So yeah, I'm super excited, Tim.
Yeah, dude, I'll tell you, I was on a Zoom call not an hour ago with a retailer that's out towards the eastern part of the United States, and literally like they're running their warehouse now based on the yellow zone, red zone process that's from that 10-step execution. So it's awesome to see that moving the needle. Before we get into that, we have a giveaway every single Power Hour, and today's is really special. We're taking a break from Yeti, and today's giveaway is a copy of the Fire Time Journal. Dude, this thing is so awesome. Have you been getting good feedback on it?
Oh yeah, even down to the soft touch cover, how heavy it is, but yes, content, and not to mention the tools, the resources that come from that. I mean, when you get your hands on one and you scroll through the first few pages, you'll see a QR code, one of them for an audio version for all the content on there, and then a few others as you go through each department for tools. And I just think that it's so much more than a magazine now, and it was just super excited to be giving those away at the expo a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I'll give a quick briefing on this if this is unfamiliar to you. So we've been planning for about 6 months to put this out. We just released it at the HPB Expo. It's literally a map for 2022. It's broken down by the 8 departments of a hearth business with articles and content for every single one: sales, leadership, installation, service. And what's so cool is at the end of every section, it just gives you an area where you can scan a QR code and you get free digital tools. And I would say, as we started to put together the bonus tools, if you mapped it out page by page, I think the bonus content would probably equal what's inside here. It's pretty darn close, honestly.
Yes.
It was a lot to get that put together.
Yep.
So, yes, it does have a soft touch cover. It's awesome. And the first 5 people to take a picture of this broadcast, share it on whatever social platform you have, and tag us, we will hit you up and we will mail you one of these. Yeah. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in, Grant. And is anyone watching this, if you have a comment of something that you want us to be talking about from a past Power Hour that we didn't get to, by all means, put in and we will get to it. But just to recap, right? So this is our, I don't know, it's our 6th or 7th Power Hour so far. Yeah, we've talked about how to make time to lead. We've talked about running weekly meetings. We've talked about the 10-step execution process, building a Harpy report, and then turning your company into a sales machine. Where do you want to start, Grant?
I mean, I felt like we had the most unfinished business with the 10-step execution. I felt like we were able to really truly get through half of it. And I feel like we need to focus on the last half to kind of round that out. And then Harpy Report, there was a few things that we can maybe touch on. Sales, of course, and we'll just kind of see what time allows. And of course, anybody that has any questions, that's what we're here for. We're here to answer questions, to understand what is, your biggest obstacles, and see if we can put our heads together and solve them.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, gosh, Danny writing it was worth the trip to Atlanta just to get the journal. Oh gosh, that means a lot. That was our hope. Let's talk about this. So in the 10-step execution process, we are going to jump right in, because I think we stopped right at after the warehouse. And when we think about the 10-step execution process of running an entire job from start to finish, right? It starts in the showroom, it moves to the estimator, it goes back to the salesperson to get the order greenlit, and then we move through the whole chain of scheduling, purchasing, warehouse. And again, if there's specific questions, put those in the comment section and we can go back and revisit those. But we really got cut off like after the warehouse, right? So we go through this rhythm of yellow zone, red zone staging, where anything that is in the next 6 to 10 days out gets staged in the yellow zone. Anything in the next 1 to 5 days out gets staged in the red zone, and every day it all gets pulled forward. So literally, like by the time a job gets from the beginning of the yellow zone to the end of the red zone, it has been double checked 10 times. And so we know that the parts are correct, everything is there, and we can just give it to the installers. But after that, like, we have the confirmation call, we've got the installation, we've got the installation paperwork, and finally we've got the thank you. Where do you want to jump in on that, Grant?
Well, I mean, I want to reiterate kind of the whole theme behind the 10 steps, in that, it's about passing the baton. It's about managing expectations, not only with customers, but also with your employees. Everybody has a position, needs to know what the next steps are to make your customer's experience the absolute best. And when you talk about where this came from was, the 10 steps is a derivative of the 7 steps to a perfect installation. And Tim, we've talked about this a number of times. It comes down to managing expectations. And so getting into the confirmation, a confirmation is absolutely vital 2 to 4 days prior to the installation to confirm everything, to confirm payment, to confirm the balance, to confirm what the customer should expect when they come out to a job from your team, to review the scope of work one more time, even though it's been reviewed with them 1 or 2 times, hopefully 2 times by that point. Confirmation is actually a huge piece of the puzzle that I think we often see is not prioritized.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've worked for companies that do a quote confirmation call, and it's better than nothing. But the confirmation call is, hey, we're going to be out on Thursday, and we'll be out sometime between 8 and 10 in the morning. Thanks. And that's not a confirmation call. When you think about what you line out, and again, we're jumping right into step 7 of the execution process, because that's where we left off. But we've gone all this way of setting it right in the showroom. We've been, calibrating the estimator properly, moving on to the schedule and the warehouse. Like, all this momentum is building, and we're just going to trust that the customer's ready, that they understand what we're going to do, even though maybe it's been 3 months since they first came into the showroom. Like, we got to do that confirmation call. And this is just straight out of your playbook, Grant. Like, when you call to confirm, there probably needs to be, if not a script, like some bullet points. So every single time we're confirming who's coming out, when they're going to be there, reviewing the scope of work, just like you said, well, the estimator reviews the scope of work at the house, but that was 3 months ago. And then the salesperson is going to review the scope of work again. But you know what? That was 3 months ago. And then the scheduler is going to review it again. But you know what? That was 2 months ago, whatever it is. Like time has passed. And that confirmation call needs to reiterate the scope of work. So if there's a question or a problem, it's dealt with right there.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's I had a scenario within our service team a couple weeks ago. The service technicians were talking about how there's a lot of knickknacks around the appliances they're working on and how they're constantly moving knickknacks and then putting them back. And I just immediately looked at support staff in the meeting and said, wait, does our confirmation explain to people that we need them to move those things? And it didn't. We actually did not have it on there. We have it, of course, on the installation side, but we didn't. As soon as we put that on there, the guys are saying, never do they deal with that anymore. And it's just a simple change. And it's really on that confirmation. One other important part of the confirmation and managing the expectations is, who are you talking to? And if you do it 1, 2, and 3 times and confirm certain things, scope of work, etc., chances are, even if you talk to 2 different people, everybody understands what's going on. And it's really important, especially right before they show up. And what's even more amazing is how many questions they have, even though they have been, taken through this information a couple times before. They still have a ton of questions once they get into it on the confirmation. It's really important for you guys to iron those out, for us to iron those out before your installers get out there. I mean, I think about being an installer and how difficult it is. And just imagine going to a project, a job that is loud, messy, you're in the house the whole time, and the customer doesn't have an expectation from you, a scope of work, a true, detailed expectation. All that does with your install team is set them up for failure, because whatever they expect is what they're going to talk to your installer about. And all of a sudden the gas route's different. All of a sudden they expected a different type of surround, and we got to confirm that stuff. And you know what? We haven't got there yet, but when you get out to the install, before you even start the install, you go over all that same information one last time to make sure that it's 100%.
Yeah. So you're taking us to step 8. Before we get there, let's round out 7. So on the confirmation call, we've got a bullet point script. We're going over the scope of work. Of course, we're verifying, when the crew is coming out. But payment's a big thing for you, Grant. And again, this is previously, I didn't do this for years until I met you. Is on that confirmation call, let them know, what does the balance due, who will be paying it. Walk us through that.
Yeah. I mean, so, and this is before me, Tim. Even before me, our company has been extraordinarily diligent on making sure that the expectation of payment are perfectly clear. We have never billed.
Louis and Christy Falco want to get paid.
They expect it once the product's there. I mean, and so through the process, whether it's confirmation and even before the installation, we confirm the balance and the payment expectations, and we rarely have issues with it because of that. So when we confirm, and it's really important to us, obviously, because in the past, leading up until the last couple of years, we only took a $500 deposit to get people out of the market, and it was a fully refundable deposit. So the balance upon completion was super important. So when we do the confirmation, we go through all the important stuff. Permit and payment are something that we are very detailed with, and we make sure that there is no if, ands, or buts about either of those, because we take care of the permit, but the customer has to call for the final inspection in our situation, which is really important for them to know. And then also, when it comes down to payment balance, people need to understand that at the end of the first day of installation, whether it's a 1-day install or 2, we expect payment in full. And we don't have issues with it. Every once in a while, if we have an unplanned incomplete, we won't collect in full. We'll leave a residual there so that the customer has some leverage, and then we get paid upon completion. But a lot of people want to, if you don't confirm that, what I find sometimes is that people want to pay when the installation has been inspected, but that's up to them in our situation. So we expect it at the end of day 1 and rarely have issues.
Yeah, this is really just, again, laying the expectation. If you tell them where you're going to go, very often they will follow you. Whereas if you leave it unclear, who is it that decides? It's them. And that may or may not be the right call. So it's really good. So, okay. So the confirmation call, 3 days ahead of time. We've got the checklist. We've verified payment, the dollar amount, who's going to be on site. Yes, Mrs. Smith or yes, Mr. Smith will be collecting before we leave that day. Then we move on to the installation. And this is where you get really pumped up, because like Dan Woodward actually told me this from HHT. You know, there's really 2 points in like the value chain for a customer where they're actually willing to pay you. And they're willing to pay you for the product, and they're willing to pay you for the installation. You know, if you were to say to your customer, you know, we're actually going to charge you an extra $200 because my installers have to spend the first 15 minutes of the day going through the warehouse to find all the pipe to pull for the order, so we're going to raise your price. You know, they're going to tell you to go fly a kite. Because it's like, well, that's your problem to figure out. It's not my problem, right? But what they will pay for is the product and the installation. This is the payoff, right? This entire process sets us up for the install to win. And very often installers just have to fail because, again, bad paperwork, it hasn't been a clean handoff, the sales team set poor expectations, it wasn't confirmed, like all these things. But when we do all this, it's to set the installers up to win. And like, now we're on the stage, right? When they came into the showroom, that was the kind of the precursor to this, but everything else has been behind the scenes. Now it's showtime. What do you feel like are the big things in the installation to be thinking about?
Well, so I just go to general scope of work and who understands the scope of work. So there's 2 things when it comes to scope of work for me. You know, in the 20 years that I've been here at Falco's, I did installation estimates for a lot of that time. And scope of work was incredibly important to me. I found the more detailed scope of work that I had, the better my installers did and the customer experience was. And it was really important for me as I went through this process to make sure the customer fully knew the scope of work. And there's 2 reasons why. The first reason I've established, and I will continue to establish, it's about managing expectations. If the customer doesn't know what you're doing, that labor charge means nothing to them. And they're going to make it up in their head in conversations with their neighbor that knows gas piping or knows direct vent inserts, but doesn't. Or, you know, just make up what they believe. And so we have to really manage expectations with the scope of work. So from start to finish, like literally every job is different and you got to treat it that way. The other thing is we're selling labor, right? And like when you're selling products and someone says that's too expensive, I would say that salesperson hasn't built enough value in that product for just to justify the price. And it's the same with labor. If we're not sharing our scope of work, if we're not investing in our scope of work, if we're not making it detailed for that customer, which is not as hard as we make it out to be, well, then where's the value? They're going to want it to be cheaper. And just because you do it quickly, because you're good at it, doesn't mean you don't deserve to be compensated for it. And when you put a scope of work that's detailed, man, it is amazingly powerful. Back to the expectations, just real quick, Tim. The 10-step execution allows for a paperwork process that tells a story. Like, I am the person that gets the once it's went through a problem situation, as went through a junior leader at Falco's, and then it gets to me. What I have to do, not being in touch with anything, is I have to go back and there has to be something that tells me the story. How did it start? Where did it go from there? What changed? When did it change? Why did it change? Who changed it? And the amazing thing about the 10-step execution in the paperwork process is the scope of work may have changed from the time the bid happened to the time the installation happened. Who changed it? What did it change? Why did it change? Who was involved? Establishing these systems, processes from one thing to the other allows for the person responsible to handle the customer at the end in an organized, professional fashion, have that story right in front of you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And I want to get to Danny's question here in just a second, but just to piggyback on that, like, you know, very often, again, installers don't want the customer breathing down their neck when they're doing the job. And again, like, what do installers want? They want to win. You know, I was an installer for years, and like, so often it's just tough when you go into a place and maybe you're missing a piece of pipe and you're nervous because you forgot a tool. And there's just so mmany things that like set you up wrong.
So true.
That starting out by going over the job with the customer makes you look like a pro. You know, hey, Mr. Jones, this is what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to just walk you through this. Make sure you feel comfortable with everything that we're going to do. And my associate here is going to get everything set up and ready while we're doing that. Like, what a good experience.
Oh, yeah. as the assistant is getting ready and prepping and asking the customer if they can put the ladder here. I mean, it's all about, building value through the process. And I can't agree more.
Yeah. So let's take this question real quick here.
Yeah.
How do you handle contractor payment on jobs? Is it the same as retail? No, I think it's a different process for sure. And I'm curious how you handle it. I can talk about how I've handled it in the past.
Yeah. So Danny, actually, this was something that I've went through in the last 6 years, maybe. So with Falco's, we're really good at going into existing homes, gas insert, wood stove, pellet stove, gas stove in the basement, sometimes a small remodel of a gas fireplace, but we're really good one-on-one with that homeowner and their project. What we weren't very good at 6 years ago was understanding that the contractor business, the builder business, whether it be spec, custom, luxury, it's different. It's totally different in expectations. In order to get that business, you have to understand that it's different. And they expect to go onto like whether it's a net 30 or, at the net the 10 the month, they expect to go on some account. Now, what I would tell you, Danny, is qualify your builders. They don't all deserve to go on account. And so at Falco's, you have to be qualified to go on account to then be billed. And every time, if it's a first person, they pay 50% down. 100%. They pay the balance at completion. They give us another job and we establish an account. We have a questionnaire that says, what are you planning on doing next year with us? What are you doing here? And we establish an account and I'll bill them, no problem. But I do have some remodelers and some people that still aren't on account. And it's because, for one reason or the other, they haven't been qualified to. So don't just not have anybody on account. You really want to qualify who you put on account.
Yeah, I totally agree. In my previous role, we were a company that did mostly new construction work, and I managed a smaller part of the business that was in retail. But that was it, is that when you earn the right to have an account, we billed nothing until the installation. And we'd bill for the labor and the installation when we did the work, and then we'd hold back, X amount of dollars for the light off that might be 4 or 5 months later. Now, but that was only going to be after they passed the criteria of having an account. Until they earned that right. Yeah. It was just like a retail job where they're paying 50 or 75% up front, and then the rest being paid at completion. But I think in the builder world, everything is bought on account. And they're taking their draw every, like you said, the 10th of the month. Like every 10th of the month, I'm taking my draw, my next amount of stuff. Man, to pay for 50% of a $5,000 fireplace when it's not going to get installed for 3 months, like that does not work in my builder line business, right? I pay for the product when it goes in. So we have to make it easy to do business with them. And what a lot of hearth retailers do is they want to treat new construction like retail, and they're two different systems, two different processes, and you have to accommodate certain things, but keep it streamlined. I mean, and you have to keep some kind of structure to it. And I think what you said, Grant, about like the first couple, it's just like they're a retail customer, and then once they prove that they didn't pay you, that they've got some volume or whatever, you make it worth their while, where an accountant gets them a discount of X on their projects and they get this billing or whatever. I think there's a lot of things you can do to sweeten that pot. Yeah.
One other thing, Danny, I want to say is we did, maybe in the last 18 months, we went to a 50% deposit on any projects over 20,000, simply because of the cost expectation. And none of our contractors actually bit back at all. They all understood that. So it's a 50, then the 90 total. So 40 and then 10 on the final is how we do our billing.
That's super good. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I just skipped over that. But same sort of thing, like get a dollar amount where nothing was billed until the actual installation, except when it was over a certain dollar threshold. Yeah. And they get that. If they're ordering some crazy custom $40,000 fireplace, that's getting billed up front. So yeah, really good question. And if there's a follow-up on that, just let us know. So on the installation, Grant, I know that you are really, really big on like protocol of when an installer comes in, how they greet the customer. We talked about them walking through the job. You don't want installers parking in the driveway either, right?
No, like, I mean, it's what it looks like before what it is. And with your consumer, like, that they're watching you pull up, that they're watching you walk to the driveway. And if they're not, that's okay, but you should expect that they are. And so I feel like I run into more problems with people that don't understand it's what it looks like to the customer more than what it is. So I believe building points, building value from the very beginning on what it looks like is incredibly important. And there's a few things you can do to let the customer know they're in good hands before you even get to the house. First thing is they call on the way. They call on the way every single time. Let the customer know when they're going to be there. There's no reason not to. I get all these excuses on why. We track it. We make sure that they do because it's absolutely necessary for setting up the day. Then when you get there, they're going to be watching you. You know that you told them when you'd be there. You park in the road. You walk together as a team up to the door and you introduce yourself and you're pleasant and you explain what's going to happen. You explain that I'm the lead and I'm going to go and take you, if it's okay, through the project today. Make sure that we're all buttoned up and perfect. My assistant here is going to set up a few things around. Hey, is it okay if we set the ladder up over there? Okay, awesome. And then, where would you like us to park? Do you want us to work from the street or can we park in your driveway? Is that okay? Or is anybody leaving today? And boom, they're like blown away. You haven't even stepped foot in the door and you got however many points to be successful. The reason this is so important to me is as a manager and dealing with upset customers, I don't want to deal with them. And I understand what happens when it is those things don't happen and we just park on the driveway. Then they assume we have, that the truck's not clean. They assume we have oil and they make it up in their mind that there might be a leak and they're parking on a driveway or someone has to leave. And we're all of a sudden going negative when you can make it such a positive experience. When you run into a problem is where the value truly shines. Because if you've done these things, those two things, among other things we'll talk about, the cool part is if you do make a mistake, they're going to be totally patient with you and very respectful because you have through the entire project. But if you're not walking with pace, if you look sloppy, if you're leaving a mess all over, if you're not doing what you said you're doing, then they're going to pick you apart. And we've all had the customers that starts with one, but then it's this and it's this and it's this and there's fingerprints and it's this. That all is in building value from the very beginning. And actually, Tim, I'm sorry I'm going off. I feel like you. It starts at the sales side. It starts all the way at the sales side on managing the success of that day. And you're building points along the way or losing points. There's no flat line in there. So, I feel like there's a big part in just the calling on the way, parking in the road before you park in the driveway, taking them through what is expected that day. Man, it's almost hard to believe you can't have a successful installation after just that.
Well, and I might have shared this before in a past Power Hour, but some of the best advice I ever got from my father-in-law when he was teaching me how to install was when you have a question, you go out to the truck and make the call.
Oh, no question.
I can't tell you, I mean, I as a salesperson, I've had so many times where an installer's calling me with a question that has a very simple answer in this installation manual, but they're in the living room. I can hear them talking to the customer in the background. And it's like they lose so much credibility. My father-in-law said, you go out to the truck, just like you said, you walk with pace, you go out to the back of the truck and you make that phone call to the tech department. And it doesn't matter. You don't call the tech department when you're in front of the fireplace in front of the customer, unless you've qualified it. You do it at the truck, you come back in, you check it, you go back out. Those things really, really matter. And they keep.
And if you are going to talk to a manufacturer, because I have this conversation with my service team and install team quite often, if you are going to talk to a manufacturer, qualify it, like you just said, with the customer. Okay. Yep. Okay, Jennifer, I basically have went through this entire unit and checked everything. I have a good idea on what's going on here and why we have this issue. I'm going to call the manufacturer and just make sure so that we don't come out here again. And I, for some reason, missed one thing. And all of a sudden, it's a different way of looking at it for the customer.
Yeah, totally. So we go through the installation and we have to show the customer how the product works. We need to relight the pilot lights of water heater. There's been so many times where I've made that mistake, or a team member of mine has, where you're driving back out there at 9:00 at night, you go relight a pilot. Those are the basics. And all of that leads us to the next step, which is our installation paperwork. That's step 9 of the 10-step execution process. We have to have thorough paperwork to document this. What pictures did we take? Did we relight the pilots? That's not an afterthought. That's not part of the installation. That's a separate step, is the paperwork.
Yeah, I want to touch on a a couple more things with installation, just real quick, Tim. So
Yeah.
you need to go over, along with the scope of work, when you're a lead installer, you have to go over permit and payment at the beginning, not at the end. You
Good.
you don't take payment at the beginning. That's not what I'm saying, but you have to go over those things. Okay. The second thing is in our, I think in one of our journal resources, we have an installation checklist. Maybe not. I can't remember, but I have one.
We
We
have a
don't
service
have it in there.
checklist.
So
We have a service checklist.
an installation checklist is absolutely what you need. So you have your paperwork and your work, and like you need a story of what the day was like from your installers from start to finish. But you need a checklist asking if you took extra venting, what did you return of that extra venting? Did you get something out of a box and have a warranty? Did you fill out the paperwork? Did you do this? Did you relight the pilot light? Did you relight all the gas, the appliances that you did? A checklist that reminds you of every single thing that installer is expected to do. And I know it seems crazy, but we're always going to forget possibly just one little thing. And a callback's a callback, whether it's big or small. So an installation checklist, giving your guys parameters so that they don't have to remember every time, and just acting as prompt for reminders to make sure you button everything up. Yeah. Now we can go on to the installation paperwork and how, and kind of like, if they have that, what is expected when it gets turned in?
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to if there's no process, there's no way for us to improve. We just can't do it. And again, I've been talking to some retailers this week around the country just about different things that we're working on. And one of the common complaints really is, man, like there's times where installers go out to the job site, but they don't take pictures. And I ask why. I'm like, oh, well, we were just in a hurry. We were trying to get to the next one. Or, maybe it's that the job wasn't completed because there was one thing that was left, but no one got notified about it because, maybe they made they sent a text message to somebody, but that text got checked and then forgotten about. Like the paperwork is the backstop, and that's what we have to have.
No question. I feel like record and documentation is everything, and understanding the whole story. It all starts with the paperwork, whether it's digital, and you have the paperwork on your computer or paperwork in general. Making sure as an installer that you fill out and complete your paperwork is just as valuable as you as an installer. Because if you're an amazing installer, but you don't tell me a story, you don't get the chimney correct every time on the pieces that you used, you're making these mistakes just on paperwork, that's a big deal. And when support staff is tracking down what pieces were used and what's incomplete, it's not something you want to be dealing with. And pictures and the process, you guys need it consistent, and you have to hold it accountable. Those are things that you have to have. We used to expect pictures, Tim. And I did ask my installation team at the time, before we actually required and held pictures accountable, I asked how often they thought they sent pictures. Then we actually ran the numbers. They said 80. We will always, as people, say 80. Ask someone how much they close in the showroom or estimates. They'll say 80, because that's our default answer when we don't know. And it ends up being 30 and 40% of the time they're sending pictures. You have to set up ways to hold your paperwork accountable and hold the work accountable consistently. And so with paperwork, we have our support staff monitor that and actually grade it. And then each week at our team meeting, we review that. And we don't get mad. We don't, we talked about this in our meetings. We're either winning or learning. We don't lose. So if we unemotionally sit down and go over what they're not doing right on their paperwork, guess what? They're like, oh, I didn't realize that. And if it becomes, multiple times, we're okay with mistakes, but we're not okay with continued multiple mistakes. And then we have something we have to figure out. But a lot of times we think they know and they don't. So paperwork process, paperwork in general, as an installer, as a business, has to be taken extraordinarily seriously.
Yeah. And again, Jerry talking about how the success is in the systems. It really is, it goes back to, like, if there's no system of what needs to be done, we have no way to get better. And when I was talking with someone yesterday about this, that when it comes to implementing something, like say installation paperwork, sometimes we don't want to come across like a jerk as a boss. So we say, well, you just try to get that paperwork in. When we say try to get it in, or like, I really encourage the team to take pictures of every job. That's nothing, like there's like, so
Yeah.
does that mean in certain situations I don't have to? Like, does that mean never? Who's the judge? It's got to be an all or nothing thing. Either we take pictures or we don't. And if we take pictures, we do it on every single job. And these are the 5 pictures that we got to take. And when it comes to installation paperwork, we do it on every single job. And I think one of the best things, Grant, from your system is that on your paperwork, you require that every field gets checked. So there's never a blank spot. And that was brilliant, because if you allow people to have blank spots, the question is, was this not filled out because it didn't apply, or because the installer forgot, or what? So when you make it to where like everything gets checked, if the answer is no, you write in no as opposed to leave it blank. That's a really practical way to actually grade like how engaged are my team members with this. And it's got to be an all nothing thing. If you don't measure that and show how it's going to benefit your installers, like they can't just feel like you're cracking the whip on them. But if you can show them that, like, if you do this, your life is going to get better, we can get more jobs done, we can pay you more. Like, there's so many things that happen with it, but they have to see how the system helps them win.
No question. I agree with all that. You have to, you have to hold it accountable, and you do have to explain why. Like, when you talk about filling out the whole paperwork, I remember a specific moment with my installation team, and I was like, guys, the support staff does not know. They do not understand a gas insert doesn't have an outside air kit, whatever. So you have to put NA. You have to put NA, because they're going to ask me, someone else, or call you every time, because they got to make sure, because they're good at what they do. If you just put NA, it's problem solved. And I had an installer actually push back a lot emotionally, right? And that's what happens. Well, I asked literally emotionally, okay, how long does it take you to put NA in the fields? And he, without thinking, said 10 seconds. And I said, okay, takes you 10 seconds and gives you everybody else on your team so much value. And it was done. And we've never had an issue. I mean, it's never perfect, but we haven't had a lot of issues since. And it really has helped support staff be more efficient.
Yeah, it's so good. Patrick's comment here that like it does increase it's the confidence in the report. That's exactly right. That I have confidence. I can look at it and know this is intentionally done. No, this is not applicable. And that's powerful. I think this whole thing, and this goes to what we've talked about with creating that weekly Harpy Report too, is that looking at numbers and metrics and performance forces us to look at things that we may not normally want to look at. And if I'm forced every day to look at the installation paperwork and check this and check this and check this and check this, it literally changes the way that we think and operate. It just does. Like, it's our neuroplasticity, our brains, like we actually have control over the way that we think based on what we choose to think about and the patterns we do. And the best example of this is not an installation example, but it applies to this. And the point is that if your installers fill out paperwork every day and they check every field, it will affect the way that they do their job. And here's the reason why. This has happened to me twice in the last month, where I've gone to work with a business and we are getting them started with a CRM system, right? Customer relationship management. They have a dashboard to view their customers. And started out, what we do is we input all their open jobs in the last 2 months that haven't closed. So that way it's all on the dashboard. They can look at their book of business. They're not piecemealing systems. And this can take time. It can take 2 to 3 hours. And it's literally me. I've done this in person and over Zoom, but like literally I flew to a city. I'm on my laptop and it's just like, what's the customer's name? John Smith. What's the phone number? 555-555-2342. What's their email? What unit are they looking at? Is this an A level, B level, C level job? Any notes we need to talk about? What stage of the pipeline is that? And we do it again and again and again. I mean, we're talking like 3 hours. I went to a dark place for some of it, but literally, even in 3 hours, by the end of it, it tells you so much about your company. And in every instance, the sales manager has changed the way they think about their jobs, where it's like, wait a minute, we only capture the email address like 30% of the time. Mm-hmm. Wait, why aren't we putting notes down about where this is in the sales pipeline? But the point is that repeated behavior over time, it changes us for good or for ill. And that's the thing, is that I don't mean to go off on huge tangent like this, but you know, the truth is that we already have a liturgy for the way that we do things. Like, even if you don't have a process, you have a process for not having a process. You're just unaware of it and you're held captive to it. But by getting on top of it, like Jerry's saying, and saying like, no, we're going to make the system, that's where we get control of our liturgy, where we say like, no, if we're going to do something repeatedly, we're going to do what is best that changes our behavior. But the point of that is that it will change your installer's behavior, just simply filling out that paperwork every day. And whether it's you or someone else in your team that's grading that paperwork, it will change the way you think about your installers and their productivity for good and for bad.
Yep. No question. One thing I want to mention on the paperwork is when you have an incomplete job. So we run into this quite a bit. First of all, you have to identify your incompletes. Is it a planned incomplete where you went out there knowing it was not going to be finished that day, say a rough in, something where a custom piece needs to come back out and go in there? Or was it an urgent or unplanned incomplete? The cool thing about the 10-step process is that it basically just goes back to whether it's the step with the salesperson, whether it's getting scheduled, whether something needs to get ordered. And it's pretty awesome that way. What I would say is you need to really focus on your urgent incompletes and have a priority to them. We don't need to get into it right now, but unplanned incompletes are urgent incompletes. And you should have some type of rules around urgent incompletes to keep your team accountable and diligent on focusing on solving that problem. So often when we have urgent incompletes, we drag our feet. Paperwork doesn't get turned in that day. Then we don't get the paperwork all filled out into the salesperson. And in our business, that's a liaison to the customer. So it's 2 days before we even called the customer to figure out how they're doing or what exactly happened. We're not scheduling it proactively. So urgent, complete, unplanned, incomplete, they should be set up as far as what the plan is before you leave. That way, when you turn in your paperwork, you should turn in your paperwork every day, whether the job's incomplete or not, or is complete. Then you already have a plan, already have it in motion, and just got to start the process again. I can't emphasize that enough on the paperwork part at the completion of the installation and transfer to support staff in the business.
That's so good. As you're describing that urgent complete process, I think you're describing every mistake that I've made in the last like 8 years of, we waited too long. We didn't, like, no one called the customer. It's been 3 days. We left their house, with the job half done. And I think I wrote this down as you're talking. I think that one of our upcoming power hours needs to be about dealing with urgent incompletes. I think that's a topic for a whole show in and of itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's keep moving. So on the back end of this process, step 7, we've got the confirmation call, which moves to the installation. Next, we've got the installation paperwork. And then finally, the thank you, step 10. And this is so important. Customers spend a ton of money with us. And the least that we can do is show our gratitude. But often, a couple of things. One, we move too fast, so we don't do it. 2 is that we don't know how it was left. And so we're afraid to follow up with the customer. And my true belief, I think that thanking them, it is the right thing to do. But in addition to that, I think some of the best marketing you can spend, let's say everything goes well. The customer goes into your showroom, they have a great experience. Your installers get out there. The customer loves them. The product works great. Now we need to get more people into our store. Is it a better idea to throw up a TV ad for a bunch of people who don't watch TV anymore and see it for 30 seconds and it's gone? Or is it a better idea to get this person who's got a bunch of friends that loves us and knows the value that we offer, tell their friends about it? To me, it's just so simple that that's what we need to do is we need to thank our customers and make it easy for them to share the experience. It doesn't mean, sometimes there's a quid pro quo where it's oh, if you refer us, we'll give you $200. I hate that. I hate it. And if your business does it, that's okay. But I don't like it because to me, it feels, I would rather have people share out of the abundance of what's been done rather than feeling oh, you owe me. And did you know my neighbor came in, but I didn't get my coupon yet. What I would rather do is honestly, just every month have your sales team send the thank you cards where they get a list of all the completed jobs, handwritten thank you cards, and throw a $5 or $10 Starbucks card inside of it. Throw 4 of your business cards and just thank the customer for their business and say, hey, if you have any friends or family that, need warmth and beauty in their living room, feel free to, give them my card and I'd love to help. I think that at scale is powerful. There's more things we can talk about with the thank you, but I think it's so powerful at the end.
I think the thank you is we dismiss it, whether it's busy, not important. They know we appreciate it, all these different things. And there's just so much value in the thank you, Tim. And even if you're going to send a card, I would recommend a phone call and at minimum a voicemail so that the customer can hear you, because it's like watching a good movie that has a poor ending. Like, you can do amazing things, but then it lets you down at the end. Two things with the thank you is you need to be prompt in your thank you. If you're prompt in your thank you, it's extraordinarily professional. And Tim, you always say people that buy $7,000 fireplaces have friends with $7,000 fireplaces, and they want to talk
100%.
about a successful purchase. They want to talk about how good of a job they did in getting you out there in the right company and at a good deal. And they will, especially if you remind them with a thank you. The second thing is sometimes something happens. Sometimes at 5 days after you leave, a log falls down or something like this. Establishing that connection right away will give them the feeling like they can call you. The last thing we want is people waiting. And so often I have people saying, oh, last year I had this happen. Now I have this happen. Well, we need to be notified that that personal connection, that salesperson is out of that process for so much of it. It could be months since they've talked to the customer. Establish that connection again over the phone. And like Tim said, with a nice card and maybe a $5 or $10 Starbucks or McDonald's gift certificate.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the best marketing money. Spend $200, go buy a bunch of $5 or $10 gift cards, keep them in your desk, and tell the sales team they can just go and get them when they need to send one out. It's powerful. And I've talked about this before, Grant, but like, I'm holding it right here, right? This is my nomadic backpack. And this is not a cheap backpack, but I got it because a friend of mine told me, Tim, this is the best backpack I've ever had. It's got a lifetime warranty, and like, you won't believe how amazing it is. I went and I bought one and I got it and I loved it. And like, I called you and I said, Grant, you get one of these. And like, literally, I mean,
I got
anytime someone like starts with Wi-Fi, I buy them a nomadic backpack, because it's like, dude, this thing is a game changer. And the best part ever, this is the best part, is that 2 weeks ago when we were in Atlanta, we were at Napoleon's Psychology of Fire event. And I went to go and grab my backpack because it was on the ground, and I grabbed my nomadic backpack, open it up, and I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't mine. And me, Sam O'Donnell, and Steven Schroeder, the CEO of Napoleon, all had our nomadic backpacks on the floor next to each other, but it was all word of mouth. Every single one of these was purchased through this string that started with my friend Robert in Alaska 3 years ago, because he knew the value, the brand made an impact on him, and he has friends that will buy expensive backpacks. And it's the same thing with fireplaces too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, shopping is hard now. Like, doing business is so difficult. People, like, everybody's busy. Customer service is very, very seldom. If you're actually providing these things, you need to cap it off with a thank you. And it will pay yourself back tenfold if you just take the time, and it only takes a few minutes. And we justify it all the time. My sales team justifies it. Everybody does it. But man, it is so impactful.
Yeah. I mean, as we speak, I got this call today. I think that Sam O'Donnell's listening as he's driving through like North Dakota right now. But we had a big client that we're in the middle of working with and landing on the Wi-Fi side a couple of weeks ago. And part of it was like, in our presentation to them, we were making a joke about how when you shop for a fireplace, it's usually at 11 o'clock at night. You got a glass of wine, you're sitting on your couch, and that's when you look. And so there needs to be something to help people at 11 o'clock at night. And so we're talking about that. So I made the comment about the glass of wine, and someone in the meeting was like, well, we've actually audited our customers, and we find our customers are really more beer people than wine. So everyone started laughing, and that kind of started making a conversation, and people arguing over what kind of beer people drink when they were buying pellet stoves and everything like that. But the CEO of the company mentioned, like, no, I'm a wine person. That's what I drink. So today, like, Sam called me, and he literally shipped this CEO a really nice bottle of wine and then a pounder of Coors Light, and said, thanks for signing up. I hope hope that we can really help you. But awesome. Like, you can't do that for everybody. But gosh, that stuff makes an imprint. And like, if you've built your brand the right way, that just capitalizes your momentum and it makes it easy to share that story with somebody.
Yeah. I mean, Danny says, that's what I was wondering. Thanks. Doing a lot more 20K plus fireplaces these days. And those are the customers that you have to make sure, not prioritizing just those, but man, they have friends that have $20,000 fireplaces that you want to be a part of their next project.
Danny just said pellet stove customers or PBR.
I was definitely thinking
Well,
wood stoves, pellet stove customers.
We actually said in the meeting, we said pounders of Busch Light, but you know, to each their own. I want to go here as we close out. We spent most of this time wrapping up the 10-step execution process. And again, I think if you rewatch this with last Power Hour, you know, you're really going to get a sense of how we run these jobs from start to finish. But to close it out, I want to talk about the Harpy Report. And it's so cool that, you know, Patrick right here has said that they have nearly a year's worth, and like they can't wait to start comparing that.
Oh yeah. Magic.
I mean, dude, that makes me so pumped. And to round this out, and actually the timing is perfect because next week on a podcast, we start a 4-part series on building out the Harpy Report and kind of the keystone metrics we can use for that. But as we talk about the Harpy Report, Grant, I don't want to get into metrics as much as like, what does it do for you? It's like Patrick's saying, to have the consistency, what's it do for you?
You know, at this point in our Harpy Report, so we have been doing our Harpy Report or a variation of a Heart Report for 10 years now. When my dad moved on from Falco's and started working for manufacturers like Enviro and whatnot, he needed a way to understand what the business was doing. And then as I've grown into the business, obviously that's what I needed. And so I started putting it together originally, and we needed it for him. But what we found when we met every Tuesday and reviewed it, it would tell us a story. It would tell us things. And at first, the first year, like Patrick's talking about, it's hard to read into it. And you kind of get frustrated because it's just numbers at first. But as soon as you have comparables and all the information together, it starts telling you a story. And I think about like the key metrics, like sometimes the best metric on my Harpy Report is the weather. Just knowing what the weather is each week in relation to if sales were soft or they weren't, or what sales are on there. There's a ton to the Harpy Report, but it's about having all the information in front of you at least one time a week, and hopefully with a comparable to the previous week. And what I mean by that is if we're in week 13, which I think we're coming close to, of 2022, you want to compare it against week 13 of 2021. If you compare months, they're hard because they bleed into weeks. Weeks are quantifiably easier to track. And so Harpy Report once a week with simple key metrics, not every key metric, but simple key metrics for each department in your business, gives you an opportunity to run it. And when I see a Harpy Report, and right now I have 3 installation crews. I've reduced down to just recently to 3 installation crews. I know right now, immediately, that it's 2 weeks earlier than I did last year. I know that the numbers are going to be impacted by that, and I see it already. My team is really excited because the schedule of installs, I have 72 scheduled installs on the schedule. Last year we had 69. They were really excited about that, but I had to remind them we had 1 more crew running last year. That's 5 jobs a week that we weren't doing. There's all these things in the Harpy Report that all of a sudden they become almost your intuition of what you're looking at and what it's telling you. That's the best way I can describe it.
Well, it's so good. I mean, an example of this, yesterday I was working with a client in the Midwest, and we were talking about backlog. And in the Harpy Report, man, in this podcast series that's coming up, like we talk about backlog because, you know, backlog is your predictive revenue, right? So when someone places a deposit for a $6,000 wood stove, now $6,000 is in your backlog. It's guaranteed revenue as long as, you know, the product shows up and you can get it in. But in this example here, we were looking at a backlog metric that was, I'm just gonna make up some numbers here, but, you know, say it's the backlog's about $200,000. And that's where it was about, you know, 2-3 weeks ago. As we're reviewing it today, the backlog has dropped $100,000. Well, that's both good and bad. It's great because it means that $100,000 is in the bank, right? So like you've made that money, which is awesome, but it means that you've got less in the hopper. So what we're working on with this client is figuring out where is the healthy backlog level for them, where this is where the backlog needs to be for us to be able to turn the revenue that we need every month, not burn our crews out. And once we know where that number is, it becomes about maintaining, right? If backlog falls, now I run a sale, and that sale is going to be used until we hit our backlog again, and then we stop the sale, right? If we're way above our backlog, we don't do any discounting. We only say yes to the A-level jobs. When you're forced to look at those things every single week, it teaches you so much about your business. And yeah, the Harpy Report is a powerful way to do it.
I want to just mention one more thing. So, Tim, we often are asked about incentive packages for employees, for installers, for service guys, for whoever. And so often I go back to the Harpy Report and KPIs, because unless you have these things situated, you can't incentivize. You don't want to incentivize on arbitrary things or things that aren't tracked reliably. You have to have.
They've been here for 4 years. Let's give them a raise.
Yeah, like, and it's a dream to pay people on performance, but you have to measure performance in order to pay people on it. The Harpy Report is the starting of that. Then you have a KPI report per team. Then you can all of a sudden give incentive to your team that's going to drive revenue and profit for you however you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, here's a great question, Grant. Before we wrap up, Lynn asked, with gas pricing going up, have you considered a 4-day week? How are you addressing drive time to and from work, employees and staff? Why don't you hit that real quick as the final question?
So to be very honest with you, we have not addressed that in abundance. So ironically, today I had a coordinator meeting, a support staff meeting this morning, and we did talk about our travel fees for jobs. We talked about restricting the areas that we're going to go, which we've never really done before. We'll go 2 hours all directions. We've talked about restricting that. Traveling to and from work, we have not addressed, but I will tell you, in the last 10 months, Valco's has always been a company that takes care of their employees, but we've went over and above in the last 8-10 months on making sure our employees are not only compensated in the best way, but taken care of in other ways. And so haven't addressed that, but that is something that I am going to note, because I need to be thinking about that. We do have multiple people that are maybe a little bit further than some here, and we got to take that under advisement. And as far as the 4-day work week, we have cut a few days out of the Friday schedule, but not all teams, and left it for a little bit of overflow and whatnot. But we have not changed it to a 4-day work week due to gas prices or anything like that.
Yeah, great question, Lynn. Okay, so I mean, I'm pumped about this, and like we said at the beginning, if you want to snap a picture of this broadcast, share it on social media, the first 5 people to do that and tag us, I will ship a Fire Time journal to. Literally, Grant, when we hang up for this, I'm going to go for a walk because I'm on like 6 hours of meetings straight. And then I'm going to go to the post office. I'm going to start mailing these things out. Our next Power Hour, gosh, this is going to be so good. Our next Power Hour is in April. And this is a topic that I am just fired up about. It's designing the perfect showroom. April 21st. It's a little bit later in the month, but we both have some travel that this is going to be when we're in the same relative space. But designing the perfect showroom, and I'm telling you, this class is not going to be about traditional versus contemporary.
This is
it's not going to be about color schemes. And I guarantee I can't guarantee, you will probably not add a single display. I would venture to say most of you remove 3 to 7 displays from your showroom after this Power Hour. That's my bet.
Or at least reorganize. I'm excited, Tim. I think the timing couldn't be better. We have we're moving into invest season, and there's maybe it's a good time to be investing into your showroom, and maybe there's some good topics that we can come up with.
Oh, it's going to be so good. Hey, most of you guys know this. We are hosting a workshop coming up in May, and it's almost too late to sign up, but there is still some time. May 1st to 3rd, we are going to take 3 days together with me, Grant, our whole Fire Time team, Matt Bradley, Christy Campbell, Sam O'Donnell, and we are going to walk you through in detail the 10-step execution process. And this thing is going to be really, really special. There's a promo going through the end of the month, $300 or $350 off for a single attendee, $700 off for 2 attendees. And yes, it's in Seattle, Washington. But what I can tell you is that you will not regret this. Spending time away from your business, working with like-minded leaders who want to grow. Like, if you've been looking to make a change in the way that things are done, this workshop is going to be how you do it.
Yeah, perfectly said, Tim.
Yeah. So, okay. Super thankful for everybody that's been on this. It means a lot. And Grant, I appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
and
that was awesome.
We'll see everybody in April. Peace.